The acrid smell of smoke hit Nora Sullivan's lungs before her feet even touched western soil. Coughing violently, she stumbled down from the stagecoach into the chaos of what should have been her new beginning. The year was 1875, and the town of Redwood Creek, Colorado, was ablaze. "Madam, you best get back on!" the stagecoach driver shouted, already turning his team around. "Whole town's caught fire!" But Nora couldn't move. The journey from Boston had taken everything she had: her savings, her courage, and her last shred of hope. There was no going back. Her betrothed, a man she knew only through letters, was supposed to meet her here. Now flames licked at the buildings down the town's main street, and billowing smoke obscured everything else. "I can't," she whispered, clutching her small carpet bag. The world began to spin, the combination of exhaustion, smoke, and despair overwhelming her senses. As her knees buckled, she caught a glimpse of a figure on horseback racing toward her through the haze. The last thing she remembered was collapsing into the dirt as ash rained down around her. Adam Cole had been 5 miles outside of town when he saw the smoke. By the time he reached Redwood Creek, half the buildings were engulfed, and most folks were either fighting the blaze or fleeing. He tied his bandana around his face and pushed forward on his stallion, Ranger, determined to help however he could. That's when he spotted her, a woman in a dusty blue traveling dress, crumpling to the ground near the stagecoach stop. Without hesitation, he spurred Ranger forward, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Miss? Can you hear me?" Adam knelt beside her still form. She was alive but unconscious, her face pale beneath a layer of soot. The stagecoach was already disappearing down the road, leaving her behind. A beam crashed from a nearby building, sending sparks flying. There was no time to waste. Adam scooped the woman into his arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her full skirts. Her carpet bag lay beside her, and he grabbed that too, securing both his precious cargo and her belongings before mounting Ranger again. "Hold on, miss," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. "I'm getting you out of here." With one arm holding her firmly against his chest, Adam turned Ranger away from the burning town and toward his homestead in the hills. The woman's head lolled against his shoulder, her breathing shallow but steady. As they rode through the ash-filled air, Adam couldn't help but wonder who she was and what had brought her to Redwood Creek on this of all days. The journey to his cabin took nearly an hour, and by the time they arrived, the woman in his arms had begun to stir. Adam dismounted carefully, still cradling her, and carried her through the door of his modest but sturdy home. "Where?" Her voice was barely audible, her eyes fluttering open to reveal a startling blue-green that reminded Adam of the mountain lakes. "You're safe, miss. Rest now." Adam laid her gently on his bed and stepped back, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. He was a 32-year-old bachelor with a woman he didn't know unconscious in his home. But what choice did he have? The town was burning, and she needed help. He dampened a cloth and carefully wiped the soot from her face, revealing delicate features and a spray of freckles across her nose. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins, and Adam found himself wondering what it would look like completely down. He shook the thought away. This woman needed his help, not his admiration. Nora woke to unfamiliar surroundings and the sound of a crackling fire. For a moment, panic seized her fire, until she realized this was a controlled blaze in a stone hearth. She pushed herself up on her elbows, her head pounding. "Easy there," came a deep voice from across the room. Nora turned to see a man rising from a chair, his tall frame silhouetted against the firelight. As he stepped closer, she could make out his features: strong jaw covered in stubble, eyes the color of rich coffee, and dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice rasping from the smoke. "Adam Cole, madam. I found you collapsed outside of town." "The fire." He paused. "Well, Redwood Creek's seen better days." Memories flooded back: the stagecoach, the smoke, the overwhelming sense of despair. Nora sat up straighter, ignoring the spinning in her head. "Mr. Richards. Was there any sign of Mr. Richards? He was supposed to meet me." I'm his, she faltered. I'm his bride. Adam's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. I didn't see anyone waiting at the stage stop. Most folks were busy with the fire. Oh. The single syllable carried the weight of her disappointment. I should go back to town. Perhaps he's looking for me. That's not possible right now, Adam said gently. The fire was bad. Most of the town center is gone. And you're in no condition to travel. Nora felt the room tilt again, but this time it wasn't from the smoke. Her carefully laid plans, her last desperate hope for a future, all potentially gone in flames. My things, she whispered. I grabbed your bag. Adam gestured to where her carpet bag sat by the door. Is there family I can contact for you? Someone back east? Nora shook her head. There's no one. That's why I came west. She looked up at the stranger who had saved her, determination hardening within her despite everything. I need to find Mr. Richards. He paid for my passage. We have an agreement. Adam ran a hand through his hair, seeming uncomfortable. Mississippi. Sullivan. Nora Sullivan. Miss Sullivan, I don't mean to be indelicate, but if this Mr. Richards arranged for you to come as a bride, well, there are other options than going through with it. Nora bristled. I'm not seeking charity, Mr. Cole. I made a commitment. And I admire that, Adam said, his voice softening. But you should know that Redwood Creek is a small place. I know most everyone, and I've never heard of a Richards planning to marry. The words hit Nora like a physical blow. That can't be right. I have his letters. She moved to stand, wanting to reach her bag, but dizziness overtook her again. Adam was at her side in an instant, his strong hand steadying her. Rest now. Tomorrow's soon enough to sort this out. As Nora reluctantly settled back onto the bed, she realized she had little choice but to trust this stranger. Outside the cabin's windows, night had fallen, and somewhere in the distance, an orange glow still lit the horizon where Redwood Creek smoldered. Thank you, she said finally, for saving me. Adam nodded once, his expression unreadable. Get some sleep, Miss Sullivan. Things often look different in the morning light. But as he returned to his chair by the fire, surrendering his bed to her, both wondered what tomorrow could possibly bring that would change their circumstances. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the cabin's windows. Nora woke disoriented, memories of the previous day flooding back as she recognized her unfamiliar surroundings. She sat up carefully, relieved when the room remained steady around her. Adam was nowhere to be seen, but a cup of steaming coffee sat on the small table beside the bed, along with a note written in a surprisingly elegant hand. Gone to check on the town. Back by midday. Please make yourself at home. AC. Nora sipped the coffee gratefully, her throat still raw from the smoke. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, plus the small sleeping alcove where she now sat. Bookshelves lined one wall, surprisingly well stocked for a frontier home. After washing her face and hands in the basin Adam had left prepared, Nora changed into her spare dress from her carpet bag. Her original traveling dress was soot-stained and reeked of smoke. She found herself wondering if Mr. Richards would even recognize her when they finally met. To distract herself from worry, Nora began to tidy the cabin, straightening Adam's few possessions and sweeping the floor. It was the least she could do to repay his kindness. As she worked, she noticed details about her rescuer: a framed photograph of an older couple she presumed were his parents, a stack of newspapers from Denver, and a desk covered with maps and papers bearing what looked like calculations. She resisted the urge to examine these more closely. Whatever Mr. Cole did was not her business. Her concern was finding Mr. Richards and fulfilling her agreement. By midday, Nora had prepared a simple meal from Adam's store's biscuits and beans, with dried apples she'd found in a jar. The domestic activity calmed her nerves, giving her purpose in this uncertain situation. The sound of hoofbeats announced Adam's return. When he entered, hat in hand, His expression was grave, but it shifted to surprise as he took in the cleaned cabin and the meal laid out. "You didn't have to do this," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I wanted to thank you somehow," Nora replied. "What news from town?" Adam removed his dusty coat before sitting at the table. "It's bad. The fire started at the mill and spread fast. Half the businesses are gone, including the hotel and general store." Nora's hands twisted in her skirt. "And was there any word of Mr. Richards?" Adam's pause told her everything before he even spoke. "I asked around. Nobody knows of any Richards planning to marry or expecting a bride." His eyes held genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry, Miss Sullivan." The confirmation of her fears should have devastated her, but Nora found herself strangely numb. Perhaps she had suspected all along that something wasn't right with Mr. Richards' proposal. It had seemed too good to be true. A comfortable home in the West, a husband who asked only for companionship and help with his business, all in exchange for freeing her from the dwindling prospects of Boston. "There's more," Adam continued carefully. "I checked with the post office. The address you would have been given for correspondence. It's just a drop box. Anyone could have collected letters from it." "I see." Nora's voice was barely audible. "So I've been deceived." "It appears so. Unfortunately, such schemes aren't uncommon. Men lure women out west with promises, then—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "Then what?" Nora asked, though she feared she knew the answer. Adam met her gaze directly. "Sometimes they sell the women to mining camps or worse. You're fortunate the fire happened when it did. It may have scared off whoever was meant to meet you." The realization of how narrowly she had escaped a terrible fate made Nora shudder. "What am I to do now? I spent everything I had on the journey here." "You can stay until you recover," Adam offered immediately. "After that, well, there will be plenty of work rebuilding the town. The minister's wife was just saying they need a schoolteacher." Nora felt a flicker of hope. "I was a teacher in Boston before." She stopped herself from explaining how her family's financial ruin had forced her to seek a husband in the West. "Then it seems Providence has a plan for you after all," Adam said with a small smile that transformed his serious face. They ate in companionable silence, the weight of Nora's situation hanging between them. She couldn't help noticing how Adam's large, work-roughened hands handled his utensils with unexpected grace, or how his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he thanked her for the meal. "May I ask what you do, Mr. Cole?" Nora inquired as they finished eating. "Your home suggests you're not simply a rancher." Adam looked surprised at her observation. "I have some cattle, but my main work is surveying. The railroad is planning a new line through these parts, and I'm mapping the best route. That explains the maps and calculations I noticed." At his raised eyebrow, she added hastily, "I didn't pry, just observed while cleaning." "No offense taken," he assured her. "It's good work, though it keeps me traveling often." He hesitated before adding, "Which is why I've never considered taking a wife. Wouldn't be fair to her." The statement hung in the air between them, oddly personal. Nora looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of her thoughts. This man was her rescuer and temporary host, nothing more. Her future remained uncertain, and romantic notions were a luxury she couldn't afford. "I should return to town tomorrow," she said finally, "to inquire about the teaching position." Adam nodded, though something like disappointment flickered across his features. "Of course. I'll take you in the morning." As they cleared the dishes together, their hands occasionally brushing, Nora found herself wondering what kind of wife Adam Cole might have chosen, had circumstances been different. The thought surprised her with its intensity, and she pushed it firmly away. She was a woman alone in the West with nothing but the clothes in her carpet bag. Survival, not romance, had to be her priority now. The ride to what remained of Redwood Creek the next morning was sobering. Nora sat behind Adam on Ranger, her arms tentatively circling his waist as they traversed the rocky trail down from his hillside cabin. The physical contact was improper, but necessity overrode propriety in the West, as she was quickly learning. As they crested the final hill, the devastation came into view. Where a bustling frontier town had stood just 2 days earlier, now only the stone and brick buildings remained intact. The wooden structures which had been the majority were reduced to charred frames or piles of ash. People moved through the ruins like ghosts, salvaging what they could. "It's worse than I imagined," Nora whispered. Adam's body tensed slightly beneath her hands. "Redwood Creek has survived hardship before. The people here are resilient." He guided Ranger down the main street, now a blackened path through destruction. A few townspeople called out greetings to Adam, curious glances directed at Nora. She felt conspicuous and clung tighter to the saddle horn, trying to maintain some distance between her body and Adam's. They stopped before a stone church that had survived the blaze, though its wooden steeple was gone. A middle-aged woman in a gray dress was sweeping ash from the steps. "Mrs. Porter," Adam called, dismounting before helping Nora down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and she felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Adam Cole!" the woman exclaimed, leaning her broom against the church. "And who might this be?" "This is Miss Nora Sullivan." She arrived on the stage just as the fire broke out. Adam explained briefly how he'd found Nora and brought her to safety. Mrs. Porter's kind face creased with concern. "You poor dear. Such a welcome to our town. Were you visiting family?" Nora hesitated, embarrassed to admit she'd been duped, but Adam spoke before she could. "Miss Sullivan is a trained teacher from Boston. I mentioned you were looking for someone to take over the school." Mrs. Porter's expression brightened immediately. "Oh, that's wonderful news. Our last teacher left to get married 3 months ago, and the children have been running wild since. Of course, the schoolhouse is gone now, but we'll be using the church until rebuilding begins." Hope bloomed in Nora's chest. "I would be very grateful for the opportunity, Mrs. Porter. Reverend Porter will want to meet you, of course, but I don't foresee any problems. We can offer room and board with us, plus a small stipend." The offer was providence indeed. Nora fought back tears of relief. "Thank you. When could I start?" "No time like the present," Mrs. Porter said briskly. "We have 15 children of school age in town, though some of the ranch families bring theirs in when weather permits. Can you start tomorrow? The children need routine now more than ever." "Of course," Nora agreed, though her stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. Mrs. Porter showed her into the church, explaining how the space would be arranged for lessons. Adam excused himself to check on some neighbors, promising to return in an hour to take Nora back to his cabin to collect her things. Alone with Mrs. Porter, Nora finally explained the truth about Mr. Richards and her journey west as a mail-order bride. The minister's wife clicked her tongue sympathetically. "You're not the first to be taken in by such schemes, dear. But perhaps it was God's plan to bring you to us instead. We desperately need someone of your education and refinement." "You're very kind," Nora said, touched by the woman's acceptance. Mrs. Porter patted her hand. "The West forges strong women, Miss Sullivan. You'll find your place here." The Reverend Porter arrived shortly after, a tall man with kind eyes and a booming voice that Nora suspected could reach the back pews without effort. He asked a few questions about her teaching experience and religious beliefs, then pronounced himself satisfied. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he declared. "Yesterday we had no teacher and a burned town. Today, at least one of those problems is solved." When Adam returned, Nora proudly informed him of her new position. Something flickered in his expression, pleasure mingled with what might have been disappointment. "That's wonderful news," he said. "Mrs. Porter will take good care of you." The ride back to Adam's cabin felt different. Nora was more aware of the solid warmth of him, the way his shoulders moved as he guided Ranger along the trail. Tomorrow she would move to the Porter's home and begin her new life. This brief interlude with her rescuer would end. The thought left her strangely melancholy. At the cabin, Adam helped her gather her few belongings. I'm glad you found a position so quickly, he said, handing her the framed photograph of her parents she'd kept wrapped in a shawl. Thanks to your recommendation, Nora replied, their fingers brushing as she took the frame. I don't know how to repay your kindness, Mr. Cole. Adam, he corrected softly. And seeing you settled safely is payment enough. In the golden afternoon light streaming through the cabin windows, Nora suddenly saw her rescuer clearly, not just his handsome features, but the character beneath. This was a good man, one who had saved her without thought of reward or advantage. Why did you help me? She asked impulsively. You could have left me for someone else to find. Adam looked startled by the question. That wasn't a possibility, Miss Sullivan. Nora, she offered in return. A smile touched his lips. Nora, then. He seemed to consider his next words carefully. I helped because it was the right thing to do. My father taught me that a man's worth is measured by the help he offers, not the wealth he accumulates. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. Adam's expression softened with memory. He and my mother died 5 years ago. Influenza. I'm sorry, Nora said, understanding the loss all too well. My parents passed 3 years ago. Father's business failed, and the stress took them both within months of each other. The shared grief created a bond between them, a recognition of similar pain. For a moment, they stood in silence, connected by understanding. We should go, Adam said finally, breaking the spell. Mrs. Porter will be expecting you before dark. As they rode back to town, Nora allowed herself to rest more fully against Adam's back, no longer concerned with maintaining distance. Tomorrow would begin her new life as Redwood Creek schoolteacher. She would be independent, respected, useful. It was more than she had dared hope for when boarding the stagecoach in Boston. Yet, as Adam's cabin disappeared behind them, she couldn't help feeling she was leaving something important behind, something that had begun in those smoke-filled moments when a stranger had carried her to safety. The first weeks of teaching tested Nora's resolve and adaptability. The children of Redwood Creek ranged from eager learners to reluctant attendees whose parents insisted they needed more help on the farm or ranch. With the town rebuilding, many families were struggling just to survive, and education sometimes seemed a luxury. The church served adequately as a schoolroom, though the hard pews were not designed for young bodies, and Nora found herself allowing frequent breaks for physical activity. She developed a routine of morning lessons followed by midday projects that involved helping with the town's reconstruction, counting nails for the younger children, measuring lumber for the older ones. Living with the Porters was comfortable enough. They had a small room to spare, formerly occupied by their daughter who had married and moved to Denver. Reverend Porter was often busy ministering to his flock in their time of need, while Mrs. Porter coordinated the town's relief efforts, meaning Nora had privacy and independence. In the evenings, she often sat on the Porter's porch, grading assignments or planning lessons. From this vantage point, she could observe much of the town's activity, including the comings and goings at the temporary saloon that had been erected with remarkable speed after the fire. It was during one such evening, nearly 3 weeks after the fire, that she spotted a familiar figure riding into town. Even at a distance, she recognized Adam's broad shoulders and the distinctive gait of his horse. Her heart quickened unexpectedly. She hadn't seen him since he dropped her at the Porters' that first day. According to Mrs. Porter, he'd been away surveying a difficult stretch of terrain for the railroad. Nora had told herself her occasional thoughts of him were merely gratitude for his rescue, nothing more. Yet watching him dismount at the hitching post outside the makeshift general store, she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation in her stomach. Would he call on her? Should she acknowledge him if their paths crossed? Her questions were answered moments later when Adam, after concluding his business at the store, glanced toward the Porter's house. Even from a distance, Nora could tell the exact moment he spotted her on the porch. He hesitated, then raised a hand in greeting before leading Ranger in her direction. Nora smoothed her skirts, suddenly conscious of her appearance after a day of teaching. Her hair, which she wore in a simple knot for school, had begun to come loose, and ink stained her fingers from grading compositions. "Good evening, Miss Sullivan," Adam called as he approached, his deep voice carrying across the quiet street. "Mr. Cole," she returned with a nod. "Welcome back to town." He tied Ranger to the porch railing and removed his hat, revealing hair flattened by its brim. "Thank you. How are you finding your new position?" "Challenging but rewarding," Nora replied honestly. "The children are eager to learn, despite everything they've been through." "Children are resilient," Adam agreed, his expression warming. "And their teacher? Is she finding Redwood Creek to her liking?" The personal nature of the question made Nora flush slightly. "Very much so. Everyone has been most welcoming." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of hammering as construction continued even in the fading light. "I brought something for you," Adam said suddenly, reaching into his saddlebag. He pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I passed through Denver on my way back and thought you might appreciate this." Curious, Nora unwrapped the package to find a brand new copy of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Her eyes widened in delight. "Oh, I love this book, but my copy was left behind in Boston." She ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "How did you know?" Adam looked pleased by her reaction. "You mentioned teaching literature in Boston, and I noticed you admiring the books in my cabin. This seemed like something a teacher might enjoy sharing with her students." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Nora deeply. "Thank you. This is perfect for my older girls." "I'm glad," Adam said simply. He glanced toward the setting sun. "I should let you get back to your work. I just wanted to see how you were settling in. Would you like to stay for supper?" Nora found herself asking impulsively. "The Porters always prepare extra, and they'd be pleased to have you join us." Adam hesitated, and for a moment Nora feared she'd overstepped. But then he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I'd like that very much, thank you." The evening that followed was one of the most pleasant Nora had experienced since arriving in Colorado. Reverend Porter returned just as Mrs. Porter was setting the table, and he greeted Adam warmly as an old friend. Over a simple but hearty meal of stew and cornbread, the conversation flowed easily from town rebuilding efforts to Adam's surveying work to humorous stories about Nora's students. "Young Tommy Jenkins actually tried to convince me that his dog ate his slate," Nora recounted, laughing. "When I pointed out that a dog's teeth couldn't possibly erase chalk, he admitted he'd dropped it in the creek while fishing when he should have been studying. That boy's father was exactly the same." Reverend Porter chuckled. "Never met a fishing hole he didn't like better than a book." "Some learning happens outside the classroom," Adam observed. "I've learned more from the land than I ever did from books." "Yet you read extensively," Nora countered, remembering his well-stocked shelves. Adam's eyes met hers across the table. "Books and experience together make for the best education. Neither is complete without the other." There was something in his gaze that made Nora feel he was speaking of more than just education. She looked away, suddenly aware of Mrs. Porter's interested observation. After supper, while the Porters retired to the parlor, Adam helped Nora clear the dishes, despite her protests that he was a guest. "I'm not much for sitting idle," he explained, rolling up his sleeves to wash a plate. The domestic scene felt strangely intimate, their elbows occasionally brushing in the small kitchen. "Will you be staying in town long?" Nora asked, trying to sound casual. "A week or so. I need to draw up my final reports for the railroad before the next surveying job." Adam handed her a dripping plate to dry. "Actually, I was hoping to visit your classroom, if you wouldn't mind. I've promised to speak to the children about geography and map making." "They would love that," Nora said, genuinely pleased. "We've been studying the territories, but none of them have ever seen professional surveying equipment." Then it's settled. "Would Thursday morning suit?" "Perfectly." As they finished the dishes, a comfortable silence settled between them. Nora found herself watching Adam's hands, strong and capable whether carrying her from danger or gently washing a teacup. I should go, he said finally, drying his hands on the towel she offered. Thank you for including me in your evening. Thank you for the book, Nora replied. And for checking on me. They walked to the front door together, and on the porch, Adam turned to her, his expression serious in the lamplight spilling from the house. I'm glad to see you thriving here, Nora. You've found your place quickly. Thanks to your help, she acknowledged. He shook his head slightly. You would have managed regardless. You're stronger than you realize. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Good night, Adam. Good night, Nora. He placed his hat on his head and untied Ranger. Until Thursday. As she watched him ride away, Nora acknowledged the truths she'd been avoiding. Her interest in Adam Cole had grown beyond gratitude. But what future could there be? He was a surveyor who traveled constantly by his own admission, and she was only beginning to establish her independence. Still, as she returned to her room and placed the new book carefully on her nightstand, Nora couldn't help smiling. Thursday suddenly seemed very far away. True to his word, Adam arrived at the church Thursday morning with his surveying equipment in tow. The children, restless from a morning of arithmetic, perked up immediately at the sight of the tall stranger and his mysterious instruments. Class, this is Mr. Cole, Nora introduced, trying to ignore how her pulse quickened when Adam smiled at her. He's a surveyor for the railroad, and he's going to explain how maps are made. That's right, Adam said, setting his transit on its tripod. Who here can tell me why maps are important? Hands shot into the air, and soon Adam had the children completely engaged, explaining how he measured distances and elevations. He had brought a large map of Colorado Territory and pointed out where Redwood Creek was located in relation to Denver and the planned railroad line. The railroad will change everything for this town, he explained. Goods that now take weeks to arrive by wagon will come in days. People will be able to travel more easily. Your town will grow. Will you build the railroad right through our town? Asked 10-year-old Sarah Williams. Adam shook his head. Not through it, but close by. About 3 miles east, where the land is flatter. But Redwood Creek will have its own station. Nora, observing from the side of the room, was impressed with Adam's natural way with the children. He explained complex concepts simply, answered their endless questions patiently, and even let the older boys look through the transit's telescope. When he produced a compass for each child's simple but functional ones he'd purchased in Denver, the excitement reached fever pitch. He spent the remainder of the morning teaching them to use the instruments, culminating in a game where teams competed to navigate to hidden treasure he'd placed around the churchyard. By midday, when parents began arriving to collect their children for the lunch hour, Adam was surrounded by adoring students. Several mothers lingered, openly appraising the handsome surveyor who had so enthralled their offspring. You've quite a following, Nora observed with amusement when the last child had departed. Adam rubbed the back of his neck, looking slightly embarrassed. Children are easy to impress with gadgets. You're the one doing the real work every day. Nevertheless, this was a welcome change for them. Nora helped him pack up his equipment. Would you care to join me for lunch? Mrs. Porter packed extra. They sat beneath a large oak tree behind the church, sharing the simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit. The warm May day had brought out the first wildflowers, dotting the grass around them with purple and yellow blooms. You're good with children, Nora remarked. Have you ever thought of having your own? The question was too personal, she realized immediately, but Adam didn't seem offended. Someday, perhaps, he replied thoughtfully. I'd need to settle in one place first. And find the right woman willing to take on a former wanderer. His eyes met hers briefly, and Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks. The right woman might not mind a little wandering, if she could wander with you. The words slipped out before she could consider their implications. Adam's expression softened, and he leaned slightly closer. Nora, Miss Sullivan! The moment was broken by young Tommy Jenkins racing around the corner of the church. Pa says to tell you the schoolhouse foundation is ready for its blessing. Nora stood quickly, brushing crumbs from her skirt. Thank you, Tommy. Please tell your father I'll be right there. The interruption dissolved the intimate atmosphere, and as they walked together to the building site where the new schoolhouse was taking shape, Nora wondered what Adam had been about to say. The foundation blessing was a town tradition, with Reverend Porter saying a prayer over the newly laid stones before construction continued. Nearly everyone in Redwood Creek had gathered for the occasion, a reminder of how central the school was to the community. Standing beside Adam in the crowd, Nora felt a surge of belonging. These people had accepted her without question, giving her purpose when she'd lost everything. Whatever happened between her and Adam, she knew she had found her home. The Reverend's prayer concluded, and people began to disperse, returning to their work. Adam touched Nora's elbow lightly. I should go as well. I have reports to complete before sundown. Of course, Nora said, hiding her disappointment. Thank you again for today. The children learned more from you in one morning than from a week of my geography lessons. I doubt that, Adam replied with a smile. But I enjoyed it. He hesitated, then added, There's a town social on Saturday to celebrate the rebuilding progress. Would you do me the honor of attending with me? Nora's heart leaped. I'd like that very much. I'll call for you at 6 then. With a tip of his hat, Adam departed, leaving Nora with the pleasant anticipation of Saturday evening and the curious glances of several townswomen who had observed the exchange. Mrs. Porter was delighted when Nora mentioned Adam's invitation. He's a fine man, she declared as she helped Nora press her best dress on Saturday afternoon. Respected by everyone, and not one to spend his earnings at the saloon like some. He's been very kind, Nora acknowledged, unwilling to admit how much more than kindness she felt for Adam. Kindness is a good foundation, Mrs. Porter said wisely. Better than passion alone, which burns out quickly. But when kindness and passion meet. She smiled knowingly. Well, that's a marriage that lasts. Mrs. Porter! Nora protested, blushing. It's only a social. But as she pinned her hair more carefully than usual and added a touch of rose water to her wrists, Nora couldn't deny the flutter of hope in her chest. Perhaps it was foolish to dream of more than independence so soon after her narrow escape from disaster. Yet Adam Cole had awakened something in her that couldn't be easily dismissed. Adam arrived precisely at 6, dressed in what was clearly his best outfit, a dark suit with a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, which he presented to Nora with a slight bow. You look beautiful, he said simply, his admiration evident in his gaze. Thank you, Nora replied, touched by the flowers. These are lovely. The social was being held in the newly completed freight office, the largest building reconstructed so far. Inside, lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Someone had brought a fiddle, and a few couples were already dancing in the cleared center of the room. Would you care to dance? Adam asked after they had greeted several townspeople. Nora nodded, suddenly shy as he led her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and secure as they joined the other couples in a lively reel. Dancing had never been Nora's strongest skill, but Adam guided her confidently, his eyes never leaving hers. As the evening progressed, they danced several more times, interspersed with conversations with various townsfolk. Many seemed pleased to see them together, offering knowing smiles that made Nora both embarrassed and secretly pleased. During a break in the dancing, Adam brought her a cup of punch, and they stepped outside for a moment of fresh air. The night was clear, stars spreading across the sky in a dazzling display impossible to see in Boston's smoke-filled skies. I never tire of this view, Adam said, looking upward. It's one of the reasons I love the West. It's magnificent, Nora agreed. Though I admit I miss some things about the East. Theaters, libraries. Redwood Creek will have those things eventually, Adam said. Especially with people like you bringing culture and education. His confidence in the town's future was infectious. Do you really believe that? I do. Adam turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Nora, there's something I should tell you." Her heart quickened. "Yes?" "The railroad has offered me a permanent position. Supervising construction of the line, then managing the station once it's built." "Adam, that's wonderful!" Nora exclaimed. "It's exactly what you've been working toward, isn't it?" He nodded slowly. "It would mean staying in one place. Here, in Redwood Creek." The implication hung in the air between them. Adam was choosing to settle down, abandoning his wandering life. "Is that what you want?" Nora asked softly. "I thought I wanted freedom to roam," Adam replied, taking a step closer. "But recently, I've discovered something I want more." Nora's breath caught as Adam gently took her hand in his. "What's that?" "A home. Not just a cabin, but a true home." His eyes held hers steadily. "With someone to share it." The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the sounds of the social fading into the background. Nora felt both terrified and exhilarated by the direction of the conversation. "Adam, we've known each other only a short time," she said, though her heart argued otherwise. "I know," he acknowledged. "And I'm not asking for promises tonight. Only for a chance to court you properly, if you're willing." Relief and joy flooded through Nora. This was not a hasty proposal but a thoughtful beginning. "I'd like that very much." Adam's smile was radiant. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, brief kiss. When they returned to the social, hand in hand, Nora felt as though everyone must see the change in them. But the dancing continued, the community celebrating its resilience, while she and Adam celebrated the promise of something new and precious beginning between them. Summer blossomed across the Colorado highlands, bringing lush greenery to the hills surrounding Redwood Creek. The town's rebuilding progressed steadily, with the new schoolhouse completed in time for the start of Nora's second term of teaching in early August. The structure was larger and sturdier than its predecessor, with real glass windows and a bell tower that could be heard throughout the settlement. Adam's courtship was as steady and thoughtful as the man himself. 3 evenings a week, he would call at the Porter's home, sometimes taking Nora for rides into the surrounding countryside, other times simply sitting with her on the porch, talking until the stars emerged. On Sundays, he escorted her to church and then to dinner, either with the Porters or at the new hotel restaurant that had opened in July. Their conversations ranged widely from books they had both read to their hopes for the town's future, from memories of their childhoods to philosophical discussions about education and progress. With each passing week, Nora's feelings deepened from attraction to something far more substantial. Adam had begun construction on a new home at the edge of town, closer to where the railroad station would eventually stand. The foundation was laid, and the frame was rising steadily with help from neighbors during weekend building parties. He never explicitly stated that he was building it for both of them, but the implication was clear in the way he asked her opinion on the layout and features. "The parlor windows will face west," he explained one evening as they reviewed his plans. "The sunset view is spectacular from that ridge." "It sounds lovely," Nora replied, trying to imagine herself in such a home their home. "There's room for a small library here," Adam continued, pointing to a corner of the drawing. "And upstairs, 3 bedrooms." His eyes met hers briefly, a future with children silently acknowledged between them. By late August, Nora had been in Redwood Creek for nearly 4 months. The trauma of her arrival seemed like a distant memory, though occasionally she still woke from nightmares of smoke and flames. On those nights, she would remind herself of how that disaster had ultimately led her to Adam and her new life. The railroad surveyors had finalized their route, and construction crews were expected to arrive by early September. Adam's new position would officially begin then, though he had already started preparations, ordering supplies and hiring local men to assist with the initial work. "Everything is happening so quickly," Nora remarked one Sunday afternoon as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name. The water was low after the summer heat, revealing smooth stones along the banks. "Too quickly?" Adam asked, a note of concern in his voice. Nora shook her head. No, just. Sometimes I have to remind myself this is real. 6 months ago, I was desperate enough to agree to marry a stranger. Adam's expression darkened at the reminder of how they had met. I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't found you that day. But you did, Nora said softly, squeezing his hand. And now here we are. Adam stopped walking, turning to face her. Yes, here we are. He took both her hands in his. Nora, I've been wanting to ask you something. Her heart began to race. Yes? My house, our house, I hope will be finished within the month. Adam's voice was steady, but she could feel a slight tremor in his hands. I know proper courtship should last longer, but out here in the West, practicality often outweighs convention. Nora finished for him, smiling. Exactly. Adam's expression softened. I love you, Nora Sullivan. I think I began falling in love with you that first day, carrying you through the smoke. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Though she had anticipated the question, hearing it spoken aloud still made Nora's breath catch. Yes, Adam. Yes, I will marry you. Joy transformed his features as he pulled her into an embrace, lifting her slightly off the ground in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, he cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her with more passion than he had allowed himself to show during their courtship. I promise to make you happy, he murmured when they finally parted. You already do, Nora assured him. They walked back to town hand in hand, stopping at the Porters to share their news. The minister and his wife were delighted, Mrs. Porter immediately beginning to plan the wedding details. The church is finally repaired completely, she declared. We could hold the ceremony in 3 weeks' time, before the railroad crews arrive and Adam becomes too busy. That seems very soon, Nora said, though the idea appealed to her more than she wanted to admit. Nonsense, Reverend Porter said jovially. When 2 people are certain, why wait? Besides, the town could use a celebration. And so it was decided. Word spread quickly through Redwood Creek, and soon Nora found herself the center of attention. Her students were especially excited, the girls peppering her with questions about her dress and the ceremony. Will you still be our teacher after you're married, Miss Sullivan? Asked 8-year-old Mary Foster anxiously. Of course, Nora assured her. Though you'll have to remember to call me Mrs. Cole. The preparations absorbed whatever free time Nora had outside of teaching. The women of the town rallied around her, helping to sew a wedding dress from fine fabric ordered specially from Denver. Mrs. Porter insisted on hosting a small celebration after the ceremony, and the hotel proprietor offered to prepare a wedding supper. Adam, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to complete their home, often by lantern light long after sunset. Nora occasionally brought him dinner at the building site, marveling at how rapidly the structure was taking shape. It's going to be beautiful, she told him one evening, standing in what would be their kitchen. It will be beautiful because you'll be in it, Adam replied, drawing her close despite his dust-covered clothes. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived for Nora, the first mail she had received since coming west. The return address showed it was from her former neighbor in Boston, Mrs. Winters. Nora opened it with trembling fingers, wondering what news from her old life could be so important. As she read, her expression changed from curiosity to shock. What is it? Adam asked, seeing her distress when he arrived for their evening walk. Wordlessly, Nora handed him the letter. It informed her that a distant cousin had died, leaving Nora a small but significant inheritance enough to secure her future or even return east if she wished. This changes things? Adam said quietly, returning the letter. Changes what? Nora asked, suddenly afraid. Your circumstances. You're no longer dependent on teaching for your livelihood. His expression was carefully neutral. If you wanted to return to Boston. Adam Cole. Nora interrupted firmly. If you think money would make me abandon you and the life we're building, then you don't know me at all. Relief washed over his features. I just want you to be sure. I never want you to feel trapped, as you might have been with Richards. I've never been more certain of anything. Nora assured him, taking his hands. This money changes nothing about how I feel or what I want. Though, she added with a smile, it might help furnish our home more comfortably. Adam laughed, pulling her into an embrace. As long as you're there, I don't care if we sit on crates. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, with the first hints of autumn coloring the aspen trees on the surrounding hillsides. The entire town seemed to have turned out for the occasion, filling the small church to capacity. Nora stood at the back, her arm linked with Reverend Porter's since she had no father to give her away. Her dress was simple but elegant, a cream-colored silk with lace accents at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of late summer wildflowers gathered by her students. When the church doors opened and she saw Adam waiting at the altar, handsome in his new suit, any lingering nervousness vanished. This was right. This was where she belonged. As she walked slowly down the aisle, Nora remembered that day 4 months earlier collapsing in the smoke-filled air, being carried to safety in the arms of a stranger. How could she have known then that disaster would lead to such happiness? Adam's eyes never left hers as she approached, his expression a mixture of awe and devotion that made her heart swell. When she reached him and placed her hand in his, the connection between them seemed to vibrate with promise. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Porter began, his voice filling the church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion for Nora. She was acutely aware of Adam's steady presence beside her, the warmth of his hand holding hers, the depth of meaning in the vows they exchanged. When he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger purchased with his savings from a Denver jeweler, it felt like the sealing of a covenant far more profound than the legal contract of marriage. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Porter declared finally. "Adam, you may kiss your bride." As Adam's lips met hers, sealing their union before God and the community, Nora felt a sense of homecoming so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. They had found each other against all odds, two souls recognizing in each other what they hadn't known they were seeking. The celebration afterward was joyous, with music and dancing continuing well into the evening. Children ran playing between the adults, Nora's students particularly excited to see their teacher as a bride. The women of the town had outdone themselves with food, and even the men who usually preferred the saloon stayed to toast the new couple. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and pink, Adam drew Nora away from the festivities, leading her to where Ranger waited, saddled and decorated with ribbons. "Ready to see our home, Mrs. Cole?" he asked, his voice tender with the new title. "More than ready, Mr. Cole," she replied, allowing him to lift her onto the horse before mounting behind her. They rode through town to cheers and well wishes, heading toward the ridge where their new house stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. As they approached, Nora gasped in surprise. Lanterns had been hung along the porch and in the windows, casting a warm, welcoming glow. "When did you do this?" she asked as Adam helped her down. "Mrs. Porter arranged it while we were at the celebration," he explained. "She thought our first night home should be special." He lifted Nora into his arms, just as he had that first day, though now there was no smoke, no danger, only promise. "Welcome home, Nora Cole," he said softly, carrying her across the threshold. Inside, she discovered more surprises. The furniture they had ordered from Denver had arrived and been arranged. Fresh flowers stood in vases on the tables. A fire burned in the hearth, taking the autumn chill from the air. And in the bedroom, the bed was made with new linens, more flowers placed on the nightstand. "It's perfect," Nora whispered, overcome with emotion. Adam set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "You're perfect," he corrected, his voice husky. "I still can't believe you're my wife." "Believe it," Nora said, reaching up to touch his face. "I'm exactly where I want to be." As moonlight replaced the sunset and the sounds of celebration faded in the distance, Adam and Nora began their life together in the home they had created, a sanctuary built from hope and love, rising from the ashes of what might have been disaster. 5 years passed, bringing changes to both Redwood Creek and the Coles. The railroad had transformed the once small settlement into a bustling town with regular train service to Denver and beyond. New businesses lined the expanded Main Street, and the population had nearly tripled. Adam's position as station manager kept him busy but allowed him to be home each night, unlike his previous surveying work. He had also invested in land around the town, which had increased significantly in value as the area developed. Nora had continued teaching for 2 years after their marriage, until the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Adam's mother. Now, with their second child, James, just learning to walk at 15 months, Nora had begun to consider returning to the classroom, perhaps teaching older students in the afternoons while a neighbor watched the children. Their home had expanded as well, with Adam adding a second wing to accommodate their growing family and Nora's desire for a proper library. The inheritance from her distant cousin had been largely invested, though they had used some to purchase additional land and to help establish the town's first public library, housed in a small building next to the school. On a warm June morning in 1880, Nora stood on their front porch, watching 3-year-old Elizabeth chase butterflies in the garden, while James practiced his unsteady steps on the grass nearby. From this vantage point, she could see the town spread out below, smoke rising from the train that had just arrived at the station where Adam would be working. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm that sometimes made it hard to remember the desperate young woman who had collapsed in the smoke-filled air of a burning town. Yet Nora never took her happiness for granted, knowing how close she had come to a very different fate. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention as Adam rode up the path earlier than expected. His face broke into a smile at the sight of his family, and the children squealed with delight. "Papa!" Elizabeth called, running to meet him as he dismounted. Adam scooped her up, planting a kiss on her forehead before setting her down to greet James, who was toddling determinedly toward his father. "You're home early," Nora observed as Adam climbed the steps to kiss her. "Special delivery came in on the morning train," he explained, reaching into his pocket. "Letter for you." Nora took the envelope, surprised to see it was addressed from Redwood Creek's own post office. "Who would write to me from town?" Adam's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "Open it and see." Inside was a single sheet of paper, not a letter at all but a deed for the building that had housed the town's first general store, now vacant since the owner had built larger premises closer to the station. "Adam, what is this?" Nora asked, confused. "Your school," he said simply. "Or rather, your academy. The town council voted last night to establish a proper secondary school, and they want you to be its headmistress." Nora stared at him in disbelief. "But I haven't taught in nearly 2 years. Everyone remembers what you did for the children after the fire," Adam explained. "How you kept teaching even when there was no proper school. The council thinks you're the perfect person to establish something more advanced for the older students. Of course," he added hastily, "only if you want to. There's no pressure." Nora looked down at the deed, then at her children playing in the yard. The opportunity to return to education while still having time for her family seemed almost too perfect. "What about the children during the day?" she asked, considering the practical aspects. "Mrs. Foster has offered to watch them along with her youngest. And I can adjust my schedule at the station to be home earlier on some days." Adam took her hand. "We can make it work, if it's what you want." Emotion welled in Nora's throat. This man, who had literally carried her from danger to hope, was still finding ways to support her dreams. "I do want it," she admitted. "I've missed teaching." Adam's smile was radiant. "Then congratulations, Mrs. Cole. It seems you have a school to build." The academy opened that September with 15 students, ranging from 12 to 17 years of age. Many were children Nora had taught in their primary years, now growing into young adults with dreams of college or careers beyond ranching and farming. The building had been renovated over the summer, with Adam overseeing much of the work himself in the evenings. Proper desks replaced the old store counters, and bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes donated by townspeople or purchased with funds raised by the council. Nora approached this new challenge with the same determination she had brought to rebuilding her life after arriving in Redwood Creek. She developed a curriculum that included not only traditional subjects but also practical skills relevant to the changing West: business arithmetic, mechanical drawing for boys considering engineering, and advanced domestic science for girls who might one day manage households or businesses of their own. Adam supported her completely, taking on more household responsibilities and often bringing the children to visit her at the academy during lunch breaks. He took particular pride in teaching an occasional lesson on surveying or railroad management, sharing his expertise with students interested in those fields. Their partnership had deepened over the years, the initial attraction maturing into a bond strengthened by shared challenges and joys. They still made time for each other amid their busy lives: evening walks after the children were asleep, occasional trips to Denver for theater performances, quiet conversations by the fire when the house was still. One evening in late autumn, after the children were tucked into bed, Adam found Nora in their library, reviewing student essays by lamplight. Her hair, now worn in a simpler style than when they'd first met, was coming loose from its pins, and reading glasses perched on her nose, a recent concession to turning 30. "You'll strain your eyes," he chided gently, coming to stand behind her chair and massaging her shoulders. Nora sighed with pleasure, setting down her pen. "Just 2 more to grade. They can wait until morning," Adam suggested, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Come sit with me by the fire. I have something to show you." Curious, Nora followed him to the parlor, where a cheerful blaze warmed the room against the November chill. Adam retrieved a package from his desk drawer and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, unwrapping the brown paper to reveal a leather-bound journal. "Open it," Adam urged. Inside, on the first page, was a sketch remarkably detailed of a woman lying unconscious while a man on horseback approached through swirling smoke. "Adam," Nora breathed, recognizing the scene immediately. "Turn the page," he said softly. Each subsequent page contained another drawing: Nora teaching in the church after the fire, their first dance at the social, Adam proposing by the creek, their wedding day, Elizabeth's birth, James taking his first steps. The final pages showed the academy building and Nora surrounded by her students. "I didn't know you could draw like this," she said, amazed by the skill evident in each illustration. "My mother taught me," Adam explained. "I'd been working on these for months. For our anniversary next month." Tears welled in Nora's eyes as she carefully closed the journal. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received. I wanted to capture our story," Adam said, taking her hand. "From that first day when I found you in the smoke to now. Sometimes I still can't believe how fortunate I am." "We both are," Nora agreed, moving to sit beside him on the sofa. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been riding into town at that exact moment?" Adam's arms circled her shoulders, drawing her close. "I prefer to think it wasn't chance at all. Something larger was at work that day. Providence," Nora murmured, remembering Mrs. Porter's words from years ago. "Whatever it was," Adam said, "I thank God every day that I was there to find you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fires dance across the hearth. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the landscape with white. Inside, wrapped in warmth and love, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from desperate mail-order bride to respected educator, beloved wife, and mother. The smoke of that burning town had long since cleared, but Adam had indeed carried her into hope, a hope that had blossomed into a life more fulfilling than she could have imagined when she'd stepped onto that fateful stagecoach 5 years earlier. "I love you, Adam Cole," she said simply, resting her head against his shoulder. "And I love you, Nora Cole," he replied, his voice rich with the certainty of a promise kept and a future still unfolding before them. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." As the snow continued to fall and their children slept peacefully upstairs, Adam and Nora remained by the fire, the journal of their life together resting between them, a testament to the unexpected ways that endings can become beginnings, and disaster can lead to destiny. In the years that followed, Redwood Creek continued to grow, eventually becoming one of the most prosperous towns along the railroad line. The Coal Academy, as it came to be known, developed a reputation throughout Colorado Territory for educational excellence, with many of its graduates continuing to colleges in Denver, Chicago, or even as far as Boston. Elizabeth Cole followed in her mother's footsteps, earning a teaching certificate and eventually taking over leadership of the academy when Nora decided to step back in her 50s. James surprised everyone by combining his father's technical mind with an unexpected artistic talent, becoming an architect whose designs shaped much of the town's later development. Adam and Nora's partnership remained the cornerstone of their family and a model for the community. When Colorado achieved statehood, Adam served briefly in local government, while Nora established the town's first women's society, advocating for female education and suffrage. They added a third child to their family in 1882, a daughter named Sarah, who grew up to become a physician, inspired by caring for Adam when he broke his leg in a train yard accident. Her decision to study medicine initially raised eyebrows in the community, but Adam and Nora supported her unconditionally, just as they had supported each other's dreams. As they entered their golden years, Adam and Nora often sat on their porch overlooking the town they had helped build, marveling at how far they had come from that smoke-filled day in 1875. Their home had become a gathering place for children, grandchildren, and friends, a beacon of warmth and welcome on the hillside. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the town held a celebration in their honor, recognizing their contributions to Redwood Creek's development. Former students, now adults with children of their own, came from miles around to pay tribute to the teacher who had guided them and the railroad man who had helped connect their town to the wider world. During the festivities, Reverend Porter's son, who had followed his father into the ministry, asked Adam to share the story of how he and Nora had met. Though it had become something of a town legend over the years, people never tired of hearing it directly from those who had lived it. Adam, his hair now silver but his voice still strong, stood with his arm around Nora, whose own chestnut hair was streaked with gray. "I was riding into town and saw smoke on the horizon," he began, the familiar tale taking on new resonance as he told it to a generation who had never seen Redwood Creek in flames. "By the time I arrived, half the town was burning. That's when I spotted a woman in a blue dress collapsing near the stagecoach stop." Nora squeezed his hand, the memory still vivid after all these years. "I didn't know then that I was rescuing my future wife," Adam continued. "I only knew someone needed help. So I picked her up and carried her through the ash to safety. And into hope," Nora added softly, completing the phrase that had come to symbolize their journey together. As they rode home that evening, the setting sun painting the sky with colors that rivaled any Denver theater backdrop, Adam helped Nora down from their carriage with the same careful attention he had always shown her. 30 years, he mused, looking back toward the town lights twinkling in the valley below. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you in that smoke. And sometimes it feels like I've known you forever," Nora replied, her hand finding his as they walked together toward the house that had witnessed their life unfold, the arguments and reconciliations, the celebrations and sorrows, the quiet everyday moments that had shaped their bond. Inside, they settled in their favorite spot by the fire, the leather journal Adam had given her years ago open on the table between them. Over time, he had added more illustrations: their growing family, the expanding town, the milestones that marked their journey. "Do you have any regrets?" Adam asked suddenly, his expression thoughtful in the firelight. "About coming west? About staying when you could have returned east after your inheritance?" Nora considered the question seriously, as she always did when Adam sought her true thoughts. "Not one," she said finally. "Even the fire that nearly claimed my life brought me to you. How could I regret that?" Adam's eyes, still warm and expressive despite the lines that now surrounded them, held hers with the same intensity they had shown on their wedding day. "You saved me too, you know. From a life of wandering, never belonging anywhere. We saved each other," Nora corrected gently. "And built something neither of us could have created alone." As the fire burned low and the old clock in the hall chimed midnight, Adam leaned over to kiss his wife of 30 years, a kiss that still held the tenderness of their first, combined with the depth of understanding that only decades together could bring. Outside their window, Redwood Creek slept peacefully, secure in its prosperity, while inside, the couple who had risen from its ashes embraced the quiet joy of a journey shared and a love that had only strengthened with each passing year. From disaster to destiny, from smoke to clarity, from strangers to soulmates, theirs was a story that would be told in Redwood Creek for generations to come, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the unexpected ways that hope can emerge from the darkest moments. And though either of them could know what challenges the new century might bring, Adam and Nora Cole faced the future together, just as they had faced that burning town so many years before, with determination, faith in each other, and the certainty that whatever came, they would meet it side by side. For the mail-order bride who had collapsed in smoke-tinged air and the cowboy who had carried her through the ash had indeed found their way into hope, a hope that continued to light their path forward, even as the embers of their beginning faded into cherished memory.